Hello, welcome to the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series. Fantastic Fiction is a monthly speculative fiction reading series held on the third Wednesday of every month, hosted by Ellen Datlow and me, Matthew Kressel. We spotlight well-known and up-and-coming science fiction, fantasy, and horror authors, and admission is always free. We publish a monthly podcast and video so people who can't attend the in-person event can still enjoy the readings. If you'd like to support the series, you can donate at kgbfantasticfiction.org/support. Anyway, on to the show.
Your first time here, this is the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series. Welcome. My name is Matthew Kressel. I co-host the series with Ellen Datlow. The series has been going since the late 90s, and we're still going strong. We survived through COVID. We did it virtually for a while. Now we're back in person, and there is never a cover charge. All we ask is that you buy a drink, hard or soft, and tip your bartender. Mary is working very, very hard to keep you hydrated. So let's all give a big hand to Mary. So I've been told by Ellen I should not do the upcoming reading so that she can do that when it's her turn. So I have very few announcements. Our website is kgbfantasticfiction.org. We recently switched from MailChimp as our email list to Zoho campaigns. Not that it matters at all to you, but if you want to be on our mailing list, go to kgbfantasticfiction.org. You can check it out, and then you can subscribe to our mailing list. We do not spam. We send about 2 emails a month just reminding you of the series, or you could follow us on Twitter and Facebook and other socials and see when the next readings are. So, I'm very happy to welcome back Elizabeth Bear and Scott Lynch. They haven't read here. By the way, they both read here together in 2016, so welcome back. It feels like yesterday, but we're really glad to have them here. Our first reader is Elizabeth Bear. Elizabeth Bear is the Hugo, Sturgeon, Astounding, and Locus Award-winning author of more novels, articles, and short fiction than she likes to think about. Her most recent books are Machine and the Origin of Storms. She lives in Massachusetts with her husband, SFF legend Scott Lynch, plus 4 cats and a very small horse. Here's Elizabeth Bear.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be back here. Oh, I'm good, thank you. I think I can do 20 minutes without dying. Maybe. We'll see. So, what I am going to read tonight is the opening scene, or as much of it as I can get done in 20 minutes, of the second Karen Memory novel that I know a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. It's happening. I don't know yet how it's happening, but it's happening. The title of the book is Angel Maker. And I think I'll just wade right in. And I'm not going to try to do Karen's accent because I'm bad at accents and I would humiliate myself. You'd think by now I would have gotten out of the adventuring business is all. If I had any sense, which I patently haven't, because here I was again, clinging to the harness of a half-wild mare at full gallop, trying to crawl up her back so as to get to the rate. You know, come to think of it, maybe I'd better go back in history and start this story a couple of days before. Step with me into the time machine, mesdames and messieurs. My friend Beatrice would say it just like that. Her accent is prettier, though. The thing was, we needed money. Not immediate like, there was enough left of the reward to hold us for a bit longer. And we weren't going to lose the ranch one way or the other because it was paid for. But stock has got to be fed, and women too, and feeding don't get no cheaper year by year. And my wife Priya was going to need buying into an apprenticeship if she was going to chase her mad science, and then there was parts and tools to think of. I could do some of the earning, but people won't pay a woman horse tamer what they'll pay a man, though they'll hold her to a higher standard and rate her lower when she's better at the job. I thought about looking for work as a rodeo clown, thinking the novelty of a girl in skirts flirting the bulls might make a selling point. But you got to travel the circuit for that work, and Priya told me outright that she'd break my ankle if I tried it. Just the one, so you can still manage the chores on crutches. And that pretty much put paid to that notion. So that was already stewing when Priya took me to Chinatown. She was looking for some special things for cooking with. Now that Madam is the mayor in Rapid City, the crib houses has got to be licensed and inspected, and the girls paid a wage, a poor wage, but something, and allowed out on days off, and allowed to send letters home to their families and such, which it ain't perfect. And a lot of them is too ashamed to tell their families what they've been doing to earn their livings, or knows their parents would disown them if they found out, so they lie and send money home, claiming it's domestic wages. They get paid a little better now, so they can buy enough to eat. Anyway, now that all that, there's shops in Chinatown to sell the kind of flowers and spices and such the Indian girls like, as well as the kinds the Chinese girls do, and the prices are better, even in a gold rush town. So Priya took me to town looking for ground-up lentils and beans, which she calls doll flour and gram flour and cardamom pods and mustard seed, and I don't even know what. But the bags smell amazing. And rice. So much rice. I was trying not to think about the money we was spending. Not that we was destitute, we could afford it for now, but we was still working on getting established as businesswomen. It turned out that our infamy was good for something, and it weren't great for bringing in horse-breaking clients. Some folks are apparently a little hard of convincing that a retired seamstress can be an expert horsebreaker worth paying money for. Though I'll stand by my reputation for being able to ride just about any old thing you like until it quits bucking. Our outgo, I have to tell you, was exceeding our income by a mite more than was comfortable. The demi-mondaine trusted me and Priya on most things. My problem was that I needed to figure out some way to convince some of the good people of Rapid City, as had means and need to keep livestock, that I knew my way around a stable as well as a whorehouse. Priya had found a proper mad scientist to apprentice to, and even a woman, which cost money now in the apprenticing fee, but would pay off handsome enough in 10 years or so. If it worked out, I would be able to retire from horse taming if I liked. I knowed from watching my dad do it that my old bones wouldn't be happy with the job none after I was 35, so that was a consideration. So the problem facing us was how to pay for the gap between the next 4 months or so, where we was still doing all right, and 10 years down the line. With Priya cooking, we weren't like to starve. We'd got us a little milk cow, a Jersey with a twisted horn, rose brown with a soft fawn face, and Priya skimmed cream and churned butter and scalded milk for yogurt like you would not believe, and made this clear yellow oil out of melted butter that she fried things in hotter than you would think butter could get without scorching, black in the pan, and entirely smoking up the kitchen. She told, anytime Karen gets going on food, she told me she was fixing to make me something she called doses, which she said was her favorite food when she was little, and made of a kind of flapjack rolled up around things. It sounded kind of like these things called crepes, which ain't got nothing to do with the dress fabric, but Beatrice makes them up sometimes, except made out of ground up rice and lentils and not wheat flour and yeast. Good food is the best thing. I was all excited about Priya wanting to teach me about her favorite recipes, too, because we'd hit a sticky patch a bit back, and I knew this was a gesture of patching things up between us, and her opening up a little again and letting go of her mad. You just gotta give people time. So it was a bright, cold day in April, and we was outside Mama Cheong's, juggling our paper sacks into our shopping baskets and figuring out how best to balance them on my mare Molly's flanks, when we heard a commotion up the top of Nome Street and more or less froze in place. Molly's head came up, ears pricked, like she was thinking of yanking her reins, but I put a hand on her neck and she didn't soften exactly, but she at least got down off her tiptoes and let her breath out. She weren't used to all this town bustle yet, having just come on a train her own self a month before from Hay Camp, my old neighbor Lutz having sent her back to me. He'd tried not to take it, but I'd given him fair price for her and her tack, wired by Western Union, so he could afford to buy a mare of his own. I'm a big enough girl, but when Molly went up tall like that, I couldn't see over her shoulder. She's not quite 17 hands, a strawberry roan with a shoulder blanket. She's a real Nez Perce warhorse my dad bought as a foal. Her face is fine-boned for a Palouse, flecked gray and red down the long, soft line of her nose, and I was looking at the pink underside of her jaw while she cased the situation. Luckily for me, though, it was all pretty unfamiliar to her. Luckily for me, though it was all pretty unfamiliar to her, she's not a flibbertigibbet, and I got her attention right back when I rummaged in the saddle pocket where I keep the carrot ends and whatnot. I gave her a hard candy and a tired carrot, last of last year's stock. Once I was pretty sure she'd forgotten that she'd been thinking about being spooky. Half of horse taming, or horse whispering as some mountebanks call it, is thinking like a horse and then being just a tad bit smarter. You gotta think around the corners. Fortunately, horses ain't got much attention span. And this one liked her groceries, which didn't hurt at all when it came to maintaining her focus. Once she was busy snuffling my apron pockets in case I had something more tucked away in there, I peered over her neck to see what was going on. My darling Priya, who can be a bit spooky her own self, had put her back to Molly's shoulder and was craning her neck uphill. I said it was a commotion, but that's a mite nonspecific. What we heard was a harsh rattle and a metallic clank that repeated at what you call imprecise intervals. This all added up to a lot more fuss than usual for a train unloading. It seemed too soon for the circus to be coming back to town. There had been one through just the last autumn, but at first, that's what I thought I was looking at. Off a little ways down the siding, 2 wranglers held a half-dozen horses, what must have just been unloaded from the train. A flat car had been towed up next, loaded with what looked like an honest-to-Betsy Wells Fargo stagecoach and a couple of smaller kits, and the teamsters were making short work of getting those down. The clanking, though, that sounded like mad science, and it was what Priya and me was both craning our heads for. Finally, I saw the source of it. A rail-thin sort of person in a duster, what had once been black and was now living up to its name. Their right hand gleamed hard metal when they raised it to puff on a big cheroot, so the rare spring sunlight could catch it below the coat cuff. Said personage was also wearing a worn-in Boss of the Plains in much worse shape than my own treasured second-hand hat. Straw yellow hair stuck out from under it in a greased-up duck's tail, and a pair of fry boots with much scuffed toes and plenty of stirrup wear on the arches. No spurs, though. Trail boss, unless I missed my guess, with a metal arm like our own Miss Lizzie, except maybe fancier, as there seemed to be curls of steam rising from it in the cold morning air. That ain't no circus, I said. Priya knew me well enough to fill in my train of thought, excuse the punditry, please, and the backstory that went along with it, so she didn't ask why in hell I was thinking about circuses. She just nodded and said, "I think it is a Wild West show," in her lilting accent and precise manner, on which I was such a terrible influence with my plain-spoken dialogue. "Who the hell brings a Wild West show to the Wild Wild West?" I asked her. In response, she handed me a 2-bite chunk of the sweet sticky rice balls she'd been munching on, which in retrospect was a pretty good answer. I chewed on it and leaned on Molly while we watched the Wild West show unload. It was a pretty good sight, and we weren't the only ones interested. All of Chinatown, or at least all of Nome Street, seemed to have stopped what they was doing and come out on the front steps to watch the fun. The street was lined with shopkeepers, customers, layabouts, and as you like it. And I was taller than most of them being mainly Celestials and Indians. So I had a pretty good view, especially once I stepped around Molly. I had looked down at my feet, as makes sense in Rapid City, as otherwise you were like to step in something awful. And when I looked back up again, what I saw struck me totally still. Not because there was 4 matched bays being harnessed up to that stage, though they was worth looking at if you like looking at horseflesh, but because of the concatenation doing the harnessing. Gentle readers, it were a machine. A mechanical cowboy, to be exact, from his sheet tin boot tops to his sheet tin 10-gallon hat. He shone in the sun like a regular mobile, such as you might hang from your porch roof, and he chimed like one too. I could see his pistons rising and falling. The small gears in his clockworks whirred under milky-veined, transparent covers over his chest and back, because while he wore riveted denim trousers, he was stripped to the waist like any roustabout. I wondered if they was carved out of rock crystal. It didn't seem like any glass would be tough enough. They replicated human contours in a most disturbing manner. As I watched, I realized there was a man behind another contraption, this one mounted on a tripod with wheels following him. The tripod had a big head on it with a whirring wheel like a sewing machine and a long barrel. The man was bent down, peering through some kind of rangefinder or eyepiece. A motion picture camera. They was making a motion picture right there in front of Priya and me, just like we could see in the nickel theaters down on Mulberry Street. They were making a motion picture right there in front of me. Maybe I was a little movie struck. I checked on Priya. She was staring too, gaze fixed on the mechanical, eyes big as saucers, her fingers curving sharply though her hands hung at her sides. Hey, I said gently, ask permission before you go rooting around in that gentleman's clockworks. She glanced over at me, eyes laughing while her mouth stayed firm. That was when all hell broke loose, and then some. It started with a flat, hard bang like a shotgun going off, followed by the sound of wood splintering. I couldn't tell exactly what was happening at the top of the hill, but of a sudden people who had been loitering in the middle of the street started dashing for the plank sidewalks, like watching the Red Sea parting for Moses and his lot. Priya either had a better line of sight than I did, faster reflexes, or more native caution, probably all three. She grabbed Molly's reins above my hand and hauled Molly and me up onto the sidewalk. It was only a 4-inch curb, but the extra height let me get a clearer view of what was going on. There was a cart, a caravan really, like a tiny house on wheels, with a panicked horse attached, rolling backward down the steepness of the hill. It was supposed to be a 2-in-hand, and you could see that plain because one of the shafts wasn't hooked up to a harness and was dragging. Somebody must have forgot to set the brake, or the brake had slipped, and before the second horse could be put in the traces, the whole equipage had started bumping backwards over the cobblestones. It was speeding up and gaining impetus and pulling the terrified dun that was in the traces backward on the slippery stones with no chance to brace herself. Hold Molly, I said to Priya, and let go of the reins. Karen Grace Memory, she yelled. And something afterward I didn't catch because I was darting out the opposite way from everybody else, toward the dragging caravan and the sideways mare. The caravan was bulky, but it didn't look too heavy for one horse to brace if she could get her weight into it proper. The problem was that she was only traced on the right-hand side, so she was crooked and staggering sideways, struggling just to keep her feet under her. And the cart was a double tree type, so the left-hand shaft had swung out and was dragging. The disaster weren't moving fast, understand, but it was building up some steam, and you wouldn't want to be caught under it, or between it and a wall, or harnessed to it with no way to get loose. The whole mess made a terrible rumble as it skittered down the hill, the steel-shod wheels striking sparks off the cobbles, and that mare grimly fighting for balance, snorting and struggling and thrashing her hooves around, too terrified or working too hard even to neigh in fear. I sprinted uphill, pushing against the folds of my skirts and cursing my corsetry. I had a decent turn of speed on me, though I weren't no whippet like Priya, and I got up ahead of that cart without getting crushed by it, though I dodged back and forth a little before darting past. Something horrible squished under my foot, and I thought I felt bones in it. I didn't look down. The traces dragged off the left-hand shaft, and I almost tripped on them and got tangled. That would have been an ignominious fate. Dragged to death by a caravan, and no mistaking it. But I somehow tottered and kept upright. Me and the dun mare, partners in not dying. If you've got that in common, you don't need much else to establish a friendly relationship on the pronto. She had traces dragging under her feet, too, which wasn't helping her keep her footing. I couldn't do much about that, but I did grab the ones that were attached to the left-hand shaft, which rapidly became the right-hand shaft, because as I lifted it up and started pulling on it, the momentum of the cart swung me around to face the assemblage and almost tossed me under the hooves of that mare. This close, and the lather rubbed off her hide under the harness, flicked my face and dress as she surged against it. She almost had it, I saw. I thought she was panicking, but she must have been a seasoned cart horse, because even with her ears flat with effort and the whites showing at the edges of her horrified eyes, even with only half her traces connected, she was still trying to manage that caravan like a professional on a tough job they somehow got stuck with. That dun mare saved both our bacon, because all I did was skittering close to her, staying away from her thrashing head and those hooves, still scrabbling on the cobbles like so many unaimed hammers, then grab her breastband in my left hand while I was holding on to the traces wrapped around my fist and wrist with the right. Then I just held on tight and pulled. I'd always been a strong girl, and I'd only gotten stronger running our little ranch with just Priya and me. She was the mad scientist, apprentice mad scientist, and I weren't. But every mad scientist needs a burly assistant to lean on wrenches and hold great piles of metal in place for fitting. And every farm needs somebody to throw around bales of hay. Well, Priya was the deft one of the two of us, and the brains of the operation. And while she was taller than me these days, she was also a willow maid. I was definitely the brawn. Not to mention all the mucking out and hauling water and chopping wood I'd been doing of late. My hands were hard, my biceps were bulging, and I'd had to let out all of my shirtwaists and all of my dresses across the shoulders twice. I heard the one I was wearing right now tear in just that spot and cursed under my breath in a most unladylike fashion as I pulled harder. The strain hit me across the chest and the shoulders as I bent my arms against the pole, thinking I could feel every fiber in the muscles there and how I didn't like the sensation none. My arms felt like to be pulled out of their sockets. My feet was skidding on the cobblestones, and the mare's tossing head was thumping me on my shoulders so hard I thought she was going to break my collarbone. Or, based on the pain, that maybe she had already done. My fingers held onto that breast straps, though, so I guessed I was just bruised up. I tried to lean my head away so she wouldn't flatten my nose while she was in there. Her hoof caught my shin. I felt the thick, hot blood and didn't dare look down because me tossing up all the Chinatown food wouldn't do much to strengthen my arm. Thing was, the more I pulled, the more I helped the mare's balance because I was pulling her straight in the shafts. And if she weren't sideways, she had a chance of throwing her weight on the evener and dragging the cart to a halt. So I pulled and skipped along so I didn't get dragged and helped her stay up and pointed uphill, and inch by inch, the caravan and the whole mess slowed. It was a dumbass move, to be utterly certain. It wasn't made any less dumbass by the fact that it was working. Might even have kept working, too, if I hadn't been not having the best of luck with keeping my own balance. The mare was definitely better at staying upright than I was. I was using her and the cart to stay on my feet now, arms flexed and pulling as hard as I could, and I could feel my feet slipping out from under me. I was wearing little girl boots with a heel and about 10 dozen mother-of-pearl buttons, and I could feel the buttons giving way, threads popping as the boots went loose at my ankles. Now, I pride myself on my command of colorful imprecations, but, reader, I had my hands full at just that particular. "Oh, jeez," I said as I started to fall. And just as I pitched forward, the caravan stopped dead with a lurch. I held on to the harness and the traces, though, which were a good thing, because I would have left teeth in the road if I'd hit that tree or the bench face first, which was how I was oriented. Instead, I hung there like a fly in a big spider's web, keeping myself in place by main strength and the grace of that bay dun mare. My feet touched the ground, sure, but they weren't holding me up. The mare was, and the traces. The mare staggered and panic flared through me, but she weren't falling. She was just getting her feet under herself, and then she braced there, solid, and let me pull my own self upright and stable against her harness. Good mare, better than these fool teamsters deserved. I unwound my right hand and dropped the shaft with a clatter. The mare jumped, and I shushed her. That had been stupid of me. I risked a glance at my hand. It was leather-burned and whatnot, my kid gloves cut to ribbons, but they saved me from doing more than welting my skin. I might have cut it to the bone with that trick, calluses or no, if I hadn't been dressed for town. It were utterly quiet on all sides. Chinatown, of all the places on the green earth, had went silent as water in a glass. So silent I could hear that ringing in my ear that's been there since the explosion last autumn. The mare nosed my hair. I patted her shoulder and she lipped the edge of my town hat, which had on it a small garden of straw flowers, as if she were thinking about a snack. I bumped her off with a fist and somehow managed to unwind my cramped fingers from her breastband, though it took me both hands to do it. I had some half-considered idea to go around the side of the caravan and make sure the brake was set, so I stepped over the drop shaft, steadying myself against the caravan's corner, wobbling in my undone boots, and met Priya coming the other way, fear in her eyes and a scowl on her face. Karen, are you? She saw me and took in my shredded gloves at a glance, and the blood soaking my left boot and the hem of my dress. Set the brake, I said. She snorted at me. How do you think I stopped the cart?
Well, thank you very much. That was great. That was bracing. And I hope we'll eventually see the rest of it someplace. We're going to take a break now for about 10 minutes. If you have things for either Scott or Bear to sign, please bring them up. I'm sure they will. Please help yourself. Have Mary help you to a drink or two, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Welcome back. Hi there. Welcome back.
Hey, listen, Alan.
I'm losing my voice, so give me a break. Thanks for coming. And our next reader. Oh, before I start, sorry, see, you let me do the thing. Okay, I'm announcing the upcoming readers. It's like, if he does the announcement at first, he always does everything. I think, let me do something.
I gotta leave you something.
You're gonna have trouble with that. The first shot's blurry for some reason. You're gonna have to be careful. So I screwed up my camera because I'm used to my phone now, but the phone doesn't work for this. Thank you.
It's revenge.
Yeah, I know, but I can delete them all. Ha ha ha. Anyway, our forthcoming readers are April 12th. We have Peng Shepard and Paul Park. May 10th, we have John Langan and Paul Tremblay. June 14th, we have Nathan Ballingrud and Dale Bailey. July 12th, we have Michael Sisko and David Surface. August 9th, we have Steve Berman and TK. September 13th, we have Benjamin Percy and Josh Roundtree. And October 11th, we have Livia Llewellyn and Robert Levy. And that's who we've got so far. Oh, see, I am losing my voice. Excuse me. Anyway, please, our next guest is Scott Lynch. His debut novel, The Lies of Locke Lamora, I realize I'm not sure is that how you pronounce it?
No, you did it right.
Was nominated for a World Fantasy Award and is now in its 36th U.S. printing 6 days later. See, I can't do this both at the same time. 16 years later. His shorter work has appeared in multiple anthologies, and he recently provided an introduction for the Tor Books reissue of John M. Ford's The Dragon Waiting. His next works in the Gentleman Bastard milieu will be More Than Fools Fill Graves, a novella, then The Thorn of Emberlain, a novel. Scott lives in Massachusetts with his wife, SF/fantasy legend Elizabeth Bear, plus 4 cats and the horse already mentioned. Please welcome.
trap.
Superhero it up.
Well, I'm not going to hit Datlow, so I guess that leaves you.
Ellen,
I'm used to it.
water.
From one from one horse person to the other.
Thank you.
Okay, check.
Hey, it's not a horse.
All right, so you've had one wonderful reader, and now you've got me. So it's not too late to down your drink and get a second or a third or a sixth. The biographies we were supposed to provide to Datlow, I actually did mine first. And by referring to my wife as SFF legend Elizabeth Bear, I got a revenge legend in the biography that she sent after me, so that's what I get for that. As she has alluded to, there's a forthcoming novella and a forthcoming novel that I've owed for a while. It's been a difficult few years. But there's been an amazing discovery in my life in this past year in the form of drugs. Drugs are good, kids. Which means that the ridiculous, omnipresent, crushing anxiety that has kind of weighed me down for more than a decade has been evaporated and replaced with a very urgent need to hand a bunch of shit in. So you can't win even when you're winning. So as alluded to, there is a novella. For the longest time, I've owed a set of novellas to Subterranean Press, and ever since the dawn of the 21st century, two of these three novellas had names. The first one, The Mad Baron's Mechanical Attic. The second one, The Choir of Knives, and their bouncing baby brother, Now, this is really vexing for me because it is very atypical for me to work on something without knowing what the hell I was going to call it, like literally years in advance. I am just not, for whatever reason, the sort of author. Like, my neuroses does not allow that. It flows in a different direction. I need a title. So this damn thing has been coming together for some time, and it was literally months into the new, happier writing process before I finally came up with something. I was washing dishes at 2:30 in the morning, and I had a wee brainstorm, and I wandered over to the whiteboard that we keep in our kitchen, and the idiot note that I scribbled there literally said something like, donkeys, horses, trails, roads, fuck, fools fill graves. And I'm like, fools fill graves, that's a pretty good title for a Joe Abercrombie novel. That's pretty awesome. It's not quite, so I came up with a couple different ideas, and I threw them to my most trusted crowd of associates, and they all said, yeah, don't go with that one. Go with the second one, and the second one is More Than Fools Fill Graves. So I had intended to do something really embarrassing tonight. You were all scheduled to hear me sing. That has been put off. You have all been spared. Hey. No, you have all been spared. Like the governor called. You're going to live. I was at MarsCon in 2020, and I'm sorry, this will stop being my fucking life story. It'll turn into a story that is on paper at some point. And one of the things that MarsCon did, like these people do not understand how to run conventions. They got a musical guest of honor who's a really good musician. And I remarked upon this. The guy's name is Mikey. And we had a lot of fun hanging out together that last weekend before the pandemic hit. And during the course of some of our drunken adventures, I said, I think I'd like to put you in a book. I think I'd like to make you a character. Do you mind? And because he's a dumbass, he walked right into my trap, and he said yes. So there's a bard in this little novella who has some songs. And you don't have to hear one of them tonight because I put the wrong file on my friggin' laptop. Fortunately, I had some of the novella that I was still working on that I could print up and bring with me. But you are spared the song. I apologize. Possibly I will sing it in the future somewhere in public. Like, it's one of those things, like the drug I'm on that basically crushes most of my anxiety. Like 3 years ago, the thought of like, sing in public? Are you stupid? Now I'm just like, missed opportunity. Maybe I'll do it later. So, this is an excerpt from More Than Fools, Phil Graves. Part of this was already posted on my newsletter, but not all of you read my newsletter. And none of you have ever heard me read this, because it has been more than 3 years now since I read anything in public. It is a miracle I speak English. It's a miracle I'm wearing pants. I'm wearing pants. I'm a white author with a beard. I'm wearing pants. How about a standing ovation? Yes, I was talking to Nick here for a couple of minutes, going like this the whole time, because I was looking for my glasses. So that is about how functional I am. But we're going to proceed with More Than Fools, Phil Graves. Author's note for the audience. Locke Lamora and Jean Tannen previously appeared in a series of novels ending with The Republic of Thieves. In these novels, nothing but good things happened to the lads, and they have enjoyed a leisurely stroll around the continent, experiencing fantastical events one after the other, none of which have left any scars or trauma at all. Everything is fine, they're fine, I'm fine. These little fuckers don't need therapists very desperately or anything like that. Locke and Jean have fled the city of Carthage, where everything was fine, and are now headed south by east across country that they do not know, following the old Theron Throne roads. After slipping down the bank of a swollen river and going for a more brisk and bracing swim than they might have otherwise liked, they have paused for a break. While Jean scouts the local terrain, Locke takes an exhausted nap in the shadow of some hilltop stones and has a disturbingly lucid dream. Apologies. This is not the beginning of the novella. This is chapter 4. Locke and Jean keep their eyes. Locke gasped out a breath of dreaming air and took in a breath of the real thing, sharp with the taste of late afternoon. The grass of sleep gave way to the real, and likewise the earth and the sky and the cold glaze of sweat beneath his clothes. He was where and as he had been in the dream's final instant, carried over in every detail, but far from where he had set himself down to rest. Indeed, he was now nearly upon the road. He whirled to stare back at the hill and its fog-threaded stones. No shadow stirred there now. No voice could be heard, just the soft sesh of the breeze through the grass, and the embarrassing shudder of his own frightened breaths, as well as the impatient whinny of an animal. An animal? Locke whirled again and looked behind him. From her wagon-top seat, a woman of middle years, with eyes like clouded flint, peered down at him. Neither woman nor wagon, nor its pair of uneasy horses, had been in his dream. But thanks to his sleepwalk, they were now close enough for conversation. The seams of the woman's face crinkled as she smiled, pleasantly enough, but whether she smiled from genuine warmth of spirit or because she was holding a 5-foot blackened iron spear, between that smile and Locke, he was not yet equipped to discern. That is fair afternoon, madam. The woman inclined her chin very slightly. I apologize. It's just... Locke gestured vaguely at the hill behind him, trying not to look as though he were doing anything to invite a lunge which might well reach him if she had any enthusiasm. I am not at my best, you see, because until a moment ago you were asleep. And more than that, I would wager. The woman was hoarse at first, but Locke was familiar with the effects of long, silent hours on the road, and as she talked, her dry voice gained vigor. You were seeing and hearing things in your sleep. You know this place? Callisti Sarin, that's what the hill's called. The stones, up there, they may be empire tombs. I've never known anyone who could say, nor anyone who would venture up there but the once, and I include myself in that tally. It is not a quiet place, if you take my meaning. There was a voice. There was a voice in my dream. There was a voice and, there was a shadow. Why he confided in her, he could not have promptly explained. Perhaps having weapons pointed at his face was settled routine in his life in a way that dream voices were not, and he needed some reassurance of human fellowship. I've felt something like that before. The voice was harsh. It hardly seems like it was a big enough word for it, but it was harsh. It made you cold to hear it, she said. When Locke nodded, she spoke on. It was unnatural, made your ears burn, as if he had stood out into a bitter wind. Yes, all that, and more. It said to keep away. Well, then it seems you met at least one friend this afternoon. Nothing I just saw or heard was friendly. There I must contradict you. One of the woman's horses scuffed a hoof and flicked its ears in agitation, and without taking her eyes or spear off Locke, she momentarily drew her reins taut. Tisk, tisk, no, sir. If something told you to clear off here, it was acting as a friend. It's the other sort of voice that you need to worry about. The sort that says, all's well, come closer, come on up and bide a while. In a lonely place like this, that's the sort of voice you need to fear. I suppose you have a point, said Locke. In fact, you have two. Is the one in your hands still strictly necessary? It stays ready, thank you. Now that we are to business, it is bad luck that you chose such a poor hide to lay in ambush, but the cause of your dispossession from concealment is unusual, and I doubt you'll make the same mistake twice, sir. Ambush? I am not a bandit, madam. Exactly true. I am preventing your banditry, and there are two ways I might go about it. I should prefer to see you walking briskly away, as you do not seem to be an absolute waste of bodily humors, but it would be no inconvenience to put a hole or two through you. Oh, would it not? Locke took a smooth step backward. Loath as he was to creep another inch toward that hilltop ever again, this was tactically preferable for ongoing conversation. Now let her take a lunge, unless she was some sort of gymnastic prodigy beyond her years. She was now as like to fall on her face as she was to touch him. I am hardly at my best, madam, for I am freshly awake and freezing and apparently haunted. But how is that grounds for such a casual offer of roadside murder? You are a bandit, therefore fit to walk or fit to bleed, the one being as good as the other. I am by no inclination a bandit, said Locke. Was this the single broadest lie he had ever told in his life? This was something to ponder in a more relaxed moment. Why do you keep insisting I must be? Well, it's plain as blue sky that you're no merchant. You're no dispatch rider, nor mercenary, nor guard. You have no trappings for any such. You are a pure stranger to these parts. The woman tugged her reins again. Her horses were obviously not pleased to be lingering here. No one who knows this road or lived within 20 miles would choose to lie in wait at the Callisti Sarin. Also, you have a wretched, haggard sort of look about you. Likely you've not slept under a roof for some while. Wretched, I will allow, said Locke, as I recently fell into a river, and owing to that I also have no goods or decent clothes, but haggard is too much. I am not haggard. Sir, you are a pigeon's worth of meat hung on a wood shaving. Well, what do you think you're about, madam? Pointing spears at strangers, proclaiming them robbers when they have undertaken no violence against your person, and then immediately making them wish they had. It had been several days since anything had happened to stoke Locke's self-regard, and it was not, in fact, as stoked now as he was trying to let on. But on the opposite hillside, he had just happened to glimpse a figure now slipping low through the grass. Either that was Jean Tannen creeping back from his reconnaissance, or, fuck his life, fuck everything, and fuck this cold stretch of road in particular. He would hope for Jean and do his best to pin the woman here with words. So he continued, Who do you think you are, dishing out threats and judgment with your wagon not fit for burning and your horses not fit for brush hairs? Well, perhaps you are no bandit after all, said the woman, or perhaps you are the first blind bandit I have ever encountered. It is indisputable that these beasts know more about celestial navigation or three-part harmony than you know about horses. Madam, if your horses were rendered for sausages and given away for free, I would not eat them. I would buy a sheet of glue instead. Vomiting it back up and eating thereof would taste better. If I were a bandit, I wouldn't rob you. I'd be too ashamed. I'd build you a fire. I'd tuck you in beside it. I'd pat you on the head and tell you how very sorry I was. Now that is bold bafflegab from a half-naked hedge skulk who can't even build a fire for his own sake. You have certainly become more lively company, sir. That causes me to wonder if you might not be trying to delay me while some Confederate returns from an errand. Countering that hypothesis is the question of where a scuffed turd like yourself would have ever made a friend. Locke sighed inwardly. Why were all the trusting and dim-witted travelers already beguiled elsewhere, leaving him to try his chances with naught but the fucking armed and cagey ones? No, said the woman. No, I do not believe I am in a mood for laying bets. I shall depart. Keep a distance now if you try to chase me. The only reason you will escape stabbing is because you have been run under hooves and wheels. At least tell me who you are before you whip those half-dead sacks of bristle to their full sad shuffle, said Locke. If nothing else, I am genuinely curious as to what your business is in this God's forsaken corner of nowhere. Oh, it's not so bad as all that, said the woman. And you, sir, have been bested by Lyrus Necerianus, the salt and sourmonger. I say the salt and sourmonger. Hereabouts, at least. In pickling season, I deal the finest vinegars, salts, and relish powders this side of Carthage. I'm on my circuit, and I advise you to be gone from it. Gods have mercy on you, and perhaps send you some clothes. Lyrus Necerianus, said Locke. Well, all this time I've been talking to Lyrus Necerianus. I might not know these parts, but even I've heard of you. Salt and sourmonger? Anodynist, more like. You couldn't sour up one cherry with 3 wagons worth of the stuff you're hauling. Mothers give your vinegar to babies to calm them down. I know of what I speak. I've had Kamori golden peppers. I've burned my tongue on sea nettles. I've had that Seresti spice coffee that causes hours of screaming. They make that coffee as a joke to play on annoying Therans, said Lycerus. Yes, said Locke, I fell for the joke, as you have fallen for mine. He would have called his timing excellent. This statement was meant to be punctuated by the precise instant of Jean Tanin's vault atop the wagon, a memorable synchronicity of verbal flourish and superior physicality. But unfortunately, Jean was tired, and as sore as Locke was, and horses have eyes. Jean emerged from the grass, as expected, copped to the situation without a word or a signal, and did indeed leap, up to disarm the spear-wielding salt and sourmonger, but his arrival was less of a triumphant pounce, and more of an awkward flop and roll, complicated by a lurch and a stomp from the alarmed horses. Lyrus Necerianus shouted and tried to introduce her spear-butt to Jean's face, but the wild jerking of the horses was no aid to her balance either. For a moment, all was chaos, Jean and Lyrus tumbling about atop and beside one another, while Locke leapt back from the wagon to avoid the hooves and wheels previously alluded to. Lyrus was a sturdy and determined woman, but Jean Tanin at close quarters was no little amount of trouble for anyone. By the time Locke managed to safely approach the wagon, Jean had spear and reins alike in hand, and had narrowly prevented the horses from carrying the whole affair off the road. I thought you said you drank that coffee on a dare, said Jean. I did say that. Locke leapt up the side of the wagon just behind the seat, but that was just because my pride was stung. No, those fuckers really got me with that one. I always meant to sort of admit to it, but I never quite got around to retelling the story. It was very painful. Well, you'll get nothing from this, I warn you, said Lyris, clutching at some sort of necklace with both hands. Nothing you take from this wagon will be worth the agony that you two are courting. Harm me or my goods, and we don't actually mean you any harm, said Jean. Right? I just got here. We don't mean her any harm. Right? Yeah. Absolutely correct, said Locke. Nothing that just transpired was personal, Lyris, including your pointing a spear at me. We would, however, appreciate a ride to the next town on your circuit. You will get no cooperation from me. Oh, for the God's sake, said Jean. We do not have daylight to waste talking you into accepting our profound harmlessness. Jean handed the spear politely back to the wide-eyed Lyris, who unclenched her necklace and took the weapon with lightly trembling fingers, like a person reaching out to test a hallucination. Also, said Jean, when you say you're a salt and sourmonger, dare I hope that you deal powdered mustard as well. I deal two kinds, said Lyris. You have fine-floured Ferrari mustard? And the Northern Ordinary as well. Excellent! Lovely! We fell into a river, you see. All my spices drowned. Jean settled himself on the bench, helped Locke to do likewise, and at last held the reins out to Lyris. There now, we are friends. You are a merchant, we are customers, as well as fellow passengers. We can talk prices as we roll. I need mustard. I am a grumpy child when I cannot get it. Are you really going to hold your spear like that the whole way? So that's an excerpt from Nothing But Happy Times for the Boys. Another fun time showcase from me, a guy who doesn't do mean things to his characters. Anyhow, that's More Than Fools Fill Graves, which will be coming from Subterranean Press. It will have illustrations. There will be an incredibly difficult to obtain, crafted in low Earth orbit by NASA scientists out of pure titanium edition, and then there'll be another edition that humans can actually get access to. I include myself in the mere humans can get access to. Like, I don't even get the really nice ones of my own work. But yeah, that's what I got for you tonight. And no singing. You are blessed. And thank you. We really do appreciate your coming out to listen to us. All right, Datlow.
Well, thank you. That was great. You can hang out, come back next month, we hope. But anyway, then you don't have to leave this minute. Have another drink and let's have fun.
You have been listening to the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series. Check out our website at kgbfantasticfiction.org and click on support if you'd like to help keep the series going. Anyway, that's our show. Thanks for listening, and see you next month.